You walk through the village square just as the bell tolls. Midday, but the sky doesn't care. It sulks in gray silence, smothered by low clouds like a nun's shroud. No birdsong. No laughter. Only the sound of boots on mud and a whisper that never quite goes away. A girl is being dragged into the center. Her sin? A red ribbon in her braid. That's it. No man, no dagger. No devil tattooed under her tongue. Just a strip of crimson silk that swayed when she walked, made someone's husband flinch, and made the priest stop mid-prayer. You watch as the crowd forms like flies to rot. Red isn't a color anymore, it's a confession. And here, in this time, a woman wearing it may as well walk around with the word whore stitched across her throat. You hear the word whispered now, though nobody says it aloud. Not yet. They don't need to. The ribbon does the talking. Red was never about flirtation here. It was a warning, a flare, the signal fire that says, this woman is unclean. This woman is tempting fate. This woman is not afraid to be seen. And that last part is the real threat, isn't it? You blink, and the ribbon is yanked from her braid. It lands in the dirt, trampled underfoot. The girl is crying, but she isn't pleading. She knows how this works. Red invites suspicion. And suspicion needs no proof. They smear ashes on her forehead and tell her she's been purified. Funny how closely purification looks like humiliation. As she's shoved to her knees, you catch a glimpse of something. A man's face in the crowd. Tight lips, bloodshot eyes, and a hint of longing, not love-envy. Because the girl wore what he couldn't admit he wanted. What if red isn't worn for men? What if it's worn in spite of them? Menstruation as sighing and leaking impurity. Now you're inside a stone-walled cottage. Fire low and windows shuttered. The woman across from you is pale, sweaty, biting the inside of her cheek. Her daughter is 12 and bleeding for the first time. They call it the curse. You try not to wince. But the girl looks at you like she's already guilty of something. Her mother wraps a cloth around her waist, so tight it bruises. She warns her not to let anyone see it. Not even God. Because in this world, red doesn't just mean you're fertile, it means you're filthy. Menstruation was seen as a leak in the soul. A divine punishment trickling down between your legs. Monks wrote treatises about how it came from the fall of man. A wound passed through generations. A monthly reminder that Eve bit the apple, and you poor thing are still paying for it. There were rules. Don't kneel on holy ground while bleeding. Don't touch bread. Don't sit near the altar. Don't even look at the Eucharist unless you want the devil to wink at you. Some towns had red benches for menstruating women. Public seats of shame. Sit there, and the whole village knows your body has turned against God. If you're unlucky, the midwife burns your clothes at night to hide the smell. Because if a man catches the scent, it's said his soul may rot from the inside out. Science? Nope. Just medieval logic. You remember the girl's face. Ashamed, quiet. Her mother tells her to pray harder next month. Because it's not enough to bleed. You have to repent for it too. If a woman's body betrays her monthly, what happens when it rebels permanently? The whore of Babylon in red. You walk through a cathedral carved from fear. Cold stone arches, echoing footsteps, and stained glass saints who always seem to be watching. But your eyes are drawn to a different image. The whore of Babylon. She rides a many-headed beast, goblet in hand, draped in crimson robes. Gold glitters on her fingers, but it's the red that matters. That blazing, violent red. This is how they see lust armed and mounted, wrapped in blood, drunk on power. The Bible paints her as a warning, but medieval artists turned her into propaganda. She was the anti-Mary, the feminine gone feral, the embodiment of unrepentant sexuality, and she wore red. Not because it was flattering, because it screamed, I know what I'm doing, and I'm not sorry. In sermons, priests thundered about her. They described her in exacting, almost erotic detail. The irony? The more they tried to scare people, the more fascinated they became. Women were told to fear becoming her. Men were told to flee from her. But secretly, everyone looked at that mural a little too long. You glance up again, and the glass seems to pulse. Not with light, with appetite. What happens when the warning becomes a blueprint? Red cosmetics as demonic disguise. Back in town, you're in the back room of a tanner's shop. Not for leather, but for rouge. The secret kind. Smuggled. Hidden. Applied only at night, in the dark, before the candle dies. A woman dips her finger into a pot of red pigment. It's crushed insects, mixed with goose fat. It smells like smoke and vinegar. She dabs it on her cheeks. Instantly, she becomes someone else. Not softer, sharper. Makeup in this world is witchcraft with prettier packaging. Red lips? That's not desire, that's deception. The devil paints his servants so they'll tempt good men. Red cheeks? Signs of sign bubbling to the surface. Rosy eyeshadow? Why not just tattoo, "I consort with Satan," across your forehead? The church didn't just hate makeup, it feared it. Because when women painted their faces, they were rewriting the script. Turning innocence into allure. Modesty into power. Inquisition records show dozens of women accused of cosmetic sorcery. Red pigment found in a widow's house was enough to tie her to demonic rituals. One bishop declared that red lipstick could summon lustful spirits, to which you might respond, but here, that's not a joke, that's grounds for execution. So every pot of rouge becomes a secret. Every painted mouth becomes a silent act of rebellion. Not seduction, survival. If a woman's face is a threat, what happens when she refuses to hide it? Sumptuary laws. Who can and cannot wear red? You're in the courtroom of color. Welcome to a medieval sumptuary council. A bunch of crusty lords in velvet cloaks deciding what peasants are allowed to wear. Spoiler, it's not much. Especially not red. The law scroll is long. The ink, red, irony? Delicious. If you're a butcher's wife, no crimson sleeves. If you're a barmaid, no scarlet petticoat. If you're unmarried and under 30, you'd better not be caught in a ruby hood unless you want the priest to preach about you specifically on Sunday. Red wasn't just scandalous, it was regulated. It belonged to the elite. The queen's train, the bishop's stole, the king's favorite courtesan. But if you tried it, off to the pillory, slut-shamed in front of God, sheep, and everyone. Because red wasn't fashion, it was status. Sign wrapped in silk. Some women wore it anyway, illegally, secretly. Under gray cloaks, in folds and linings. A scarlet flash when they moved too fast. A ribbon tied around an ankle. Not enough to break the law, just enough to say, "I know what power looks like." You see one now. Her gown is brown, boring, forgettable, until the wind lifts it just enough to reveal crimson thread in the hem. Her eyes catch yours. She knows you saw. That flicker? That's not fashion. That's mutiny. What happens when women weaponize what they're not allowed to wear? Lust in monasteries, when red lives in the mind. You enter the abbey at twilight. Silent stone. Frost on the windows. Not even the rats dare speak, but you can feel it. The monks are terrified. Of what? Themselves. They chant. They whip their backs raw. They avoid eye contact with the statue of Mary, because even she has curves carved by someone who had a little too much imagination. And when they close their eyes at night, they dream in red. Red lips, red gowns. Red mouths whispering promises that ruin their prayers. Monks wrote about it constantly. Lust inflamed by color. Visions of women in crimson cloaks riding beasts or seducing saints. The red wasn't on her clothes anymore, it was behind their eyelids. And whose fault was that? Women's, obviously. Even when they were hundreds of miles away, cloistered in convents or buried in books, they still haunted these men. You pass a scriptorium where one monk is copying the Book of Revelation. His pen shakes as he paints the whore of Babylon. Her robe, scarlet, the pigment, precious, imported. reserved only for images of saints and sinners. But here's the twist. Sometimes monks saved their best red for her. For the whore. As if, deep down, they feared her more than they feared hell. Or worse, they wanted to. You flip through a monk's private journal. Every page stinks of guilt. But you notice something curious, the ink? Red. What happens when sin no longer needs a woman, just imagination and ink? Ed light districts, brothels, branding, and the color of fleshs. Now you're in the gutter. Literally, the brothel is a wooden structure slumped near the river. Its shutters are painted a deep, murky red. You think it's a fashion choice. It's not. That red? It's mandatory. Welcome to the first red light district. Not Las Vegas, not Amsterdam, London, 13th century. Brothels had to be marked. Red doors, red lanterns. Sometimes even red flags hanging from posts, fluttering like the warning signs they were. Not for men, of course. Men came here on pilgrimage. This was to warn everyone else. The women inside are dressed in scarlet. Forced to be. Part punishment, part uniform. A walking billboard that screams fallen. You pass through the threshold and feel the shift. It's warmer, louder. Smells like wine, sweat, rose oil, and something burnt. One woman laughs too hard. Another just stares. She's wearing red from head to toe, like she's been dipped in shame. But look closer. Her gown has gold trim. Her eyes are lined in charcoal. She doesn't look ashamed. She looks bored. Because here's the catch. Once labeled, once stained, once you've got red on your name, you're free. No one expects you to be good anymore. No one tries to make you small. You're already damned. And damned women are dangerous. Outside, a preacher screams about scarlet women. Inside, one lights a candle and sings. You realize something horrible and beautiful. They own it now. What happens when the warning becomes armor and shame becomes power? Dressed for death. Why witches were executed in red. It's dawn. The fog hasn't lifted. You hear boots on gravel. Chains clinking. A crowd assembling. Quieter than usual. She's coming. The accused. They say she danced naked under the blood moon. Cursed a priest's manhood. Read aloud from a book written in red ink. What did she actually do? She wore a crimson veil to church. A thin one. Too thin. Now she walks to her death. Not in rags, though. That's the detail that stops your breath. She's dressed in red. Not a uniform. Not prison garb. A hand-stitched gown. Scarlet velvet. Black lace at the throat. She looks like a queen walking into fire. Historically, some witches were dressed in red for execution. Not always, but enough to leave an echo. Red was seen as the devil's color, so burning a woman in red felt symbolically correct. Red equals witch. Witch equals fire. Fire equals God's will. Neat little math equation of madness. The crowd spits. One man throws a stone. It hits her shoulder. She doesn't flinch. You catch her eyes just before she climbs the pyre. There's no fear there. Just fury, controlled. Ice beneath flame. They tie her hands, douse the wood. One priest mumbles a blessing. Another lights the torch. The flame hits the base of the stake, crawls up her dress. Red becomes black. Silk becomes ash. But you see the truth before it disappears. She chose the dress. She knew what they'd say, what they'd see, and she wore it anyway. The wind changes direction. Smoke chokes the priest. And you swear you hear her laughing. What if the women in red didn't just get punished? They planned it. Holy Blue versus Scarlet Woman, the war of female archetypes. You sit at the back of a chapel. Candlelight flickers. Incense chokes. And everywhere -blue Virgin Mary hovers on the wall, carved into altars, embroidered on banners, flooding your vision like a bruised sky. Her robe, always blue. Pale, pure, and distant, like water you'll never reach. The church spent centuries painting her this way, cold, clean, untouchable. Now look across the aisle. Another woman. Not in statue form, real, alive. A merchant's widow with a red veil that falls over her eyes. The nuns won't take her in. The priests won't bless her home. She's not married. Not virgin, not dead, so she's dangerous. In medieval eyes, a woman could only be two things: Mary or the whore, blue or red, mother or temptress, silenced or burned. That wasn't just art, that was doctrine. Clerics preached about it. Painters reinforced it. Tailors stitched it. Even saints were color-coded. Red meant passion, and passion unless crucified or cloistered meant sin. The Virgin Mary's blue pigment was lapis lazuli, rarer than gold. It was imported from Afghanistan at tremendous cost. Her holiness literally had a price. Red, by contrast, was earthy, cheap, feminine, contaminated, something that bled. And here's the twisted genius of it. The closer a real woman came to the Virgin's model, the more pressure crushed her. Stay silent. Stay veiled. Stay pure. Because one slip, a laugh too loud, a skirt too short, a look held too long, and suddenly the blue dissolves. And you're wearing red, not on your body, in your name. What happens when the sacred feminine becomes a prison and the scarlet one holds the key? Now we go deeper. Past fabric. Past makeup. Past choice. You're born with it this time. The girl on the edge of the village has red hair. Thick, unruly, rust-colored coils that shine like polished blood when the sun hits. She's 8. Already marked. Red hair wasn't cute in the medieval mind, it was cursed. Suspicious. Proof that something devilish nested in your bloodline. Judas Iscariot was often painted as a redhead, so were witches. So were demon spawn in illuminated manuscripts, their hair flaring like flames. Red hair meant unpredictable temper. Sexual appetite, a tendency to speak when not spoken to. In a man, that might get laughed off. In a woman, it's an omen. She might steal your seed, or wither your crops, or curse your livestock with a single stare. You know girl things. Some towns even dunked red-headed girls in rivers during droughts. If the rain came, she was blessed. If it didn't, well, hope you float. Inquisitors wrote that redheads were more likely to copulate with demons. Based on what? Nothing. But once the ink dried, it became gospel. The girl grows older, gets luider, wears gray, avoids eye contact, but her hair refuses to hide. A stain she didn't choose, that no one will let her forget. At 17, she's accused of poisoning a well. No evidence. Just suspicion. The villagers come with torches. But before they find her, she's already gone. Just her hair left behind, tangled in the fence, glowing in the moonlight like an accusation. If red is something you can be born into, what if it's not a curse, but a calling? Red is silent rebellion, veils, underdresses, and hidden fury. You're in a castle now. Nobility, perfume, protocol. The women glide like swans across the great hall, necks long, smiles tight, every one of them dressed in muted pastels. Except underneath. Their underdresses flash red when they turn too fast. Their garters, their sleeves, the inside of their gloves, scarlet, crimson, burgundy. Not loud enough to be punished, but not subtle enough to go unnoticed either. This is rebellion stitched in silk. Sumptuary laws said no red unless you were nobility or clergy. But these women? They found the loophole. You can't police what you can't see, and so they wore red in layers. Against their skin, in secret. As a reminder that they still had choice, even if only in thread. It became a secret code. A signal passed in corridors, whispered in corners. Red wasn't just defiance, it was survival. Like the duchess whose husband beat her, but couldn't stop her from dying in a scarlet shroud. Or the girl who served wine in a plain dress, but wore red shoes to funerals, just to remind the mourners whose blood still mattered. The clergy preached purity. But these women stitched rage into their seams. Not enough to burn for it, just enough to breathe. And when they danced at feast days, You could see it barely. A flicker of crimson as the skirt spun. A flash that said, "I'm still here." What happens when rebellion doesn't scream, but bleeds quietly beneath the surface? Pagan blood queens, fertility, sacrifice, and fear of the feminine divine. The church will never admit this, but before the Virgin Mary wore blue, the goddesses were red. You've stepped into an older place now, a forest clearing. Stones marked with symbols nobody carves anymore. Blood offerings, animal bones, ribbons tied to trees. And in the center, a woman draped in red, face painted with ash, chanting to something older than saints. Pre-Christian fertility cults worshipped women who bled. Not as shameful, as sacred. Red was life, power, renewal. The womb wasn't a curse, it was a gateway. The bleeding body, a vessel of cosmic rhythm. Menstruation synced with the moon, pregnancy with the harvest. Blood sacrifices weren't punishment, they were currency. And the priestesses always wore red. This is what terrified the church the most, because if bleeding women were holy, then everything they'd said about sin, shame, and silence would collapse like a cathedral on rotten stone. So they rewrote the story, turned blood into filth, power into guilt, and red into a threat. The old goddesses were renamed demons. Their temples were destroyed, their priestesses hunted. But some rituals survived, hidden inside peasant practices. A red ribbon tied around a newborn's wrist, a menstrual cloth buried under moonlight, a whispered prayer to a goddess no one dares name. You realize something. Red wasn't always the color of punishment. It used to be the color of worship. And maybe it still is. What if the church didn't fear red because it was evil, but because it was true? Scarlet branding and public shame. You're not allowed to suffer quietly. That's not how the church works. Pain must be public. And it must be red. You walk through a square in 14th century France. The air reeks of piss, wine, and fire. A wooden post stands in the center. Tied to it is a woman with a red-hot iron pressed to her skin. She's being marked. Not executed, not flogged, branded, like livestock. Because she wore red to seduce a married man. Because she inflamed lust. Because she wouldn't confess. Her sin is now a scar, a letter on her thigh, her chest, her cheek. It varies by region, but the message is the same. Don't trust this flesh. It bleeds sin. The mark was sometimes an F for femme fatale, foolish woman. Other times, an A for adultery. Sound familiar? Nathaniel Hawthorne didn't make it up. He just cleaned it for Protestant audiences. In real life, the branding was literal. The iron sizzling into muscle. And yes, the mark was always red. Medieval punishments were obsessed with visual morality. If they couldn't control your desires, they'd control your image. Your skin became your confession. In England, certain courts ordered red scarves or veils as punishment. Women who seduced priests, or worse, spoke of their affairs publicly, were paraded in shame parades, cloaked in red rags. The idea was simple. You used red to lure men, now wear it like a crown of filth. Even walls weren't safe. Some towns painted doors red to mark houses of lechery. It started as regulation. It ended as humiliation. Because red didn't just whisper danger, it screamed it. And here's the twist. Branding wasn't always permanent. Some women bribed executioners to make the iron cold. A mark that looked real but didn't burn. A fake shame. A secret rebellion. That's how survival worked. Play the part of the fallen woman, but keep the fire for yourself. The cruelty wasn't just the heat, it was the performance. And just when you think it can't get worse, you hear the monks chanting nearby, praising the righteous pain of women purified by flame. Next, the devil's favorite color palette, straight from the walls of hell. Medieval art painting hell and sign in red. Walk into a medieval church, cold stone. Echoing steps, candles flickering. The saints look down, painted in calm golds and heavenly blues. Now look behind the altar. Hell yawns open. It's not abstract. It's not metaphor. It's graphic. Demons with swollen bellies, drooling teeth, and long claws. Naked women strung upside down, their thighs flayed open, their mouths gaping in silent agony. And through it all, red. Fire, blood, tongues, eyes. Hell is drenched in it. Why? Because red was the currency of sin. Medieval painters were not subtle. Lust was painted in scarlet gowns and vermilion lips. Gluttony had red wine trickling down jowls. Wrath, red eyes. Pride, a red crown. Every sign glowed crimson. Red was hell's chosen branding. And women? They were always the centerpiece. The seductress leading men into the abyss. The whore pulling saints off their path. She's in red robes, standing next to Satan, smiling. You've seen her, the whore of Babylon. Her iconography didn't stay in text. It bled into stained glass and murals. Sometimes she rode beasts. Sometimes she rode men. Either way, she was painted in a dress so red it looked soaked in blood. Artists like Hieronymus Bosch took it even further. His hellscapes are carnivals of pain. Sexuality is grotesque, red is everywhere, and desire is punishment. The message? If you feel heat between your legs, you're already burning. And no, it wasn't just Catholic art. Protestant painters, angry at Catholic opulence, painted red robes on popes and whores alike. Red became a weapon, used in oil and egg tempera to strike at the heart of hypocrisy. Red was never just a color. It was a character. Here's the disturbing part. Medieval viewers loved these images. They stared at them for hours, not because they were shocked, but because they recognized themselves. The art wasn't about warning sinners. It was about watching them. And you're next. The moment your gaze lingers too long, the devil in red is already inside you. But the final chapter? That's not about hell. It's about what happens when red breaks free. When red escapes the cage, you thought red was a prison. It isn't, it's a weapon. And by the 15th century, the cage starts to crack. Women start wearing red on purpose, not as sin, but power. Aristocratic wives defy their husbands in embroidered scarlet. Courtesans wear crimson gloves to lure popes. Even some queens dare to pose in ruby-colored robes, daring the church to blink. Red starts showing up on flags, banners, seals. Not just of lust, of rebellion, peasant revolts, heretic sects, pagan cults disguised as pilgrims. Their symbols? Crimson hands, red suns, drops of blood. You begin to realize something. Red isn't just being used. It's choosing sides, and now you see her, not the virgin, not the whore, something else. She's standing on the edge of a burning town, her cloak torn, her lips dry, her thighs stained with blood, not from sex, not from sin, but from birth, creation, power. She stares at you, doesn't speak, just bleeds. She's not ashamed, and that's the real threat, because once red stops hiding, the world doesn't know what to do. The church tries to double down, more branding, more burnings, but the color won't die. It stains flags and revolutions. It soaks paintings in passion. It becomes lipstick, lingerie, stage curtains, silk sheets, Valentine hearts, stop signs. The fear never fully leaves. That's why red still makes people nervous. Because deep down, buried under centuries of sermons and shame, we all remember, red isn't sexy. It's dangerous. It's power ungoverned. It's the color of the forbidden truth that still hasn't been silenced. And you're still watching, still staring, still drawn to it. Which means the story isn't over. Not really. You've seen the veil pulled back. You've tasted the sign beneath the silk. History doesn't whisper, it screams. And here at the inner chapter we answer. So if you crave the stories they tried to erase, if you want the blood-stained truths behind crowns, cages, and confessions, then don't look away. Subscribe. Turn the bell red. Because this isn't the end. It's just the next chapter.